Hello everyone. Now, as you might hear, I'm still a fair bit sick, but I wanted to bring up a discussion point. I don't really do this too often, but this is something that I often mention on my stream, and something I feel pretty strongly about, so I figured I make a vid about it. Now, my issue with this game, as of right now, is how heavily it's focused on damage. In fact, damage dealt is such a fundamental part of this game, and it's the one thing that is also being heavily rewarded and reinforced by the game itself. We have First Blood, getting the first kill. This gives you Zulu flags, which give you credits. We have Confederate, 20% damage to 6 ships. This gives you Zulu Hotel, which is 50% Commander XP. And then we have Kraken, which is 5 kills. And this gives you Equal Speed Charlie flags, which is 50% XP. So we have the basic 3 economy flags. We have Ship XP, Commander XP, and credits. All come from various forms of killing or dealing damage. This is the bread and butter. And it's all focused on damage alone. Now, this would be fine if the whole setup wasn't so entirely skewed even further in the favor of dealing damage. The fundamental issue I have with all non-damage achievements in this game is that, well, first of all, they require you to survive. Every single one of them has the requirement that you need to survive the battle. Dreadnought, Fireproof, Unsinkable, none of these will trigger if you don't survive. The game doesn't care how much damage you tanked, how useful you were for your team. If you die while doing it, you get squat. You get nothing at all. Secondly, they all reward raw damage taken. Not angling, not potential damage, not intelligent damage taken, but they reward raw damage taken. So this is not necessarily rewarding good play, because any potato who sits in the very far back, damage cons a single fire, then get hit by a torpedo, and then floods for a minute before damage conning again, and then survives once again sitting at J10 in the corner somewhere. This guy will get Dreadnought and Unsinkable as his rewards. So this guy will get rewarded for essentially playing horribly. And that's the second issue. The third issue, these rewards are only given at the end of the game. No one, including yourself if you're a newer player, know just how much you're doing for the team until you see the scoreboard. There's no positive reinforcement. There's no encouragement for the average player to take all this damage, to tank all this damage. So the average player, only if he survives, might see. If the average player takes a ton of damage and survives, which is not often the average player does this, only then will he get some sort of positive encouragement that he's actually done something well during this game. Most of the time, no rewards at all for any sort of tanking done. Damage dealt, on the other hand, instantly rewarded. We have Devastating Strikes, we have First Blood, we have Confederate, we have High Caliber, we have Double Strikes, Arsonist, Liquidator, Close Quarter Experts, Witherer, Kraken, Just a Flesh Wound, I don't know how many others there are. These are all instantly rewarded, and you achieve them as soon as you do them, without delay. Everyone on the server sees this guy just did this much damage and was this goddamn awesome, and this is positive reinforcement, and it's for damage dealt. Yet the same kind of positive reinforcement for any other actions that are so vital to actually winning battles doesn't really exist. There's almost no reinforcement for anything else besides dealing damage. Pretty much all the achievements are based on dealing damage, or alternatively surviving and getting the other ones. Now, I know the game actually does give you XP for various things, like spotting, for example. It does give you XP. It just doesn't mention it, and the problem is the game doesn't let you know it's rewarding you for XP for this. There is no in-game instant positive feedback for anything besides the damage. So that's why you have the average player focusing solely on this one factor, dealing damage. We have camping BBs, we have cruisers that sit in the backline who don't use their radar or provide AA cover, we have DDs that don't capture objectives and don't scout, CVs that don't scout, and so forth and so forth. And all of this is, in my opinion, largely a symptom of wargaming not efficiently enough encouraging other types of action besides dealing damage. So what is actually my suggestion for this? Well, if you watch my stream, you'd know that I've often commented on multiple different types of achievements and ribbons that the game could offer you. Well, I can give you some basic examples. For example, tanking. Instantaneous tanking rewards, especially for potential damage. For example, every 1 million potential damage, you could reward the players with a ribbon or achievement. Like you could have it be called Juggernaut or Resilient or whatever name you want. You could have different names for different tiers of it, or you could just have one Resilient 1 to 10. Like Resilient 1 is tanking 1 million potential, Resilient 10 is tanking 10 million potential damage. And the name isn't really that important. What's important is the instant feedback to the players. And that yes, the game is noticing that they are tanking really well, and the game is rewarding them for them. And yes, it's letting all their teammates know that this guy, this battleship who's sitting there in the middle and being shot at, is absorbing an absolute ton of fire. Like, this doesn't even need to reward the players with any flags or camos or whatever. If Wargaming is afraid of it messing with the economy. It's just a heads up for the player and everyone else that yes, their work is being noticed and appreciated, and already this, in my opinion, would have a huge impact, because it would encourage these players to do more of it, because they can, and it would lead to a lot of potential positive reactions, like getting Resilient in a DD could be really amusing. You're breaking 1 million potential damage in a DD, or getting it in a cruiser, or potentially getting it really early in a battle, like 2 minutes into a battle someone gets Resilient, like what the hell happened, and like these would be positive reactions to something else than just dealing damage. Other things that should be rewarded: spotting. Most new DDs have no idea how valuable the spotting they provide is. Neither does the average carrier player. And why would they? Because the game doesn't really let them know just how important it is. So why not have a similar type of scaling reward across the board for all these ships? What it's called, once again, pretty irrelevant. You could have something bird focused, like Sparrow, Hawk, and then if you spot a ton you get an Eagle reward or something. Or it could just be called counterintelligence 1 2 3 4 or so forth, and it could reward you for every 50k or 100k spotting damage. How you balance it is up to you, but once again, some sort of positive reinforcement for carriers who are actively spotting the enemy, DDs who do it. Once again, this could also lead to amusing situations where cruisers or even battleships might get this award, and it would tell you a lot about the game when a battleship is getting spotting achievements. So why not reward these things? And cruisers, why not reward radar usage? Like, you could call the reward clairvoyant or something similar for a ton of radar spotting being done. Or fleet support if they're shooting down strike planes that are heading for their teammates. Speaking of planes, why is the only plane reward in the game this insane, almost impossible to reach for the average player, kill all planes reward called clear sky? Why not ace for carriers who shoot down a lot of fighters, or fleet defender for a carrier who shoots down a lot of strike planes? People don't like when a carrier, like people that post these screenshots, you see it very often, for example on Reddit, people post screenshots where they've shot down like 70 planes, and then there's a guy in chat complaining, wow, this carrier doesn't offer any AA support at all. You see these screenshots very often, and carriers experience this really often when people call them out for not doing their job, even though they are doing it. And the problem is, the game isn't telling anyone. The game isn't letting them know. The game doesn't let people know when a carrier is being effective at its job. So the average player won't notice when the carrier is strafing some attack squad. So why not give a reward for a carrier who does a really good job of defending their teammates? Once again, this doesn't even need to give you any flags. It doesn't even need to give you any camos. Just letting the player and all the other players on the server know that someone is doing something correct and it's being rewarded and noticed by the game is very, very important. Then there's objective play. Where's the reward for this? Yes, you get the capping flag, but it doesn't really tell you anything besides that. So why not build upon this that we already have, like stalwart defender ribbon for someone who resets a ton of capture points, someone who's defending a lot of caps, or Conquer, okay, that's maybe not the best name for an achievement, but something like that for someone, so for that one DD who sailed around the map and basically fully capped all 3 objective points. Reward positive actions, give positive reinforcement for actions that are good for winning the game. As of right now, the game only lets you know it's really rewarding you for one thing, and one thing alone, and that's damage. If you die in the game, you get no tanking, spotting, or objective focused achievements. None. If you, like, in your average game, you will mostly see damage, only damage focused achievements. Experienced players, like me and people who have played this game for a lot, they know just how important all these things that I mentioned, like spotting, capping, defending, tanking, all these things, they know how important it is for winning the game, and how important it is, and how it leads to a higher win rate if you do it consistently and often. But the average player has absolutely no idea. He has no idea what actually leads to these things, because he doesn't have the experience. So he's relying on the game to actually tell him. That's why we get so frustrated when we see potato play, as we call it, because we know it's objectively bad. The problem is the average player doesn't know, and the game isn't really telling them it's bad either. If you see a battleship who pushes in and does a ton of damage, tanks a ton and dies, and then you see a guy who sits in the very back in a battleship and snipes a ton and lives, and you look at the scoreboard afterwards, you might notice that they both have the same achievements. Let's say both of them get Confederate and both of them get High Caliber. You see no difference in the achievements that both the ships got. So for the average player, they look at, well, this guy died, but this guy on the other hand sat back and sniped all game. He got the same achievements, but he survived. So clearly this guy in the back has a better idea of what he's doing. Now this is of course objectively false, but because of the feedback the game gives you, it's easy to make this kind of conclusion. So that's kind of my thing, and that's kind of something that I've been very annoyed with this game, is that it really doesn't want to give you, it really puts so much emphasis on damage dealt alone. And especially I feel like we've been seeing a degradation in the level of gameplay. The average level, in my opinion, in this game has been steadily dropping. Now, I don't want to sound completely like horribly elitist when I say this, but I do feel like the average level of play has steadily gotten significantly worse than even a year ago. A year ago, I would say it was already significantly better than it is now. I don't know if it was the Steam release that brought us a lot of new players, or what the reasoning is, but I feel like I see horribly, terribly awful decision making and gameplay all the time, and I have to wonder if perhaps wargaming shouldn't like somehow deal with this, do something about it, instead of just letting it happen and just basically letting the gameplay get worse and worse and worse without at least trying some forms of improvement. The idea of tutorials is always great, of course, but the problem is tutorials, most people skip tutorials, and you don't really remember tutorials for long. Like you remember it that day, and then the next day you've forgotten it. The positive feedback that you try to impart through a tutorial will, in my opinion, never stick. You need positive reinforcement in the game. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.